"There seems to be a misunderstanding, ma'am," said Flight Attendant Emily Carter, her voice polite but laced with condescension. "We need you to move to accommodate a VIP passenger. This seat is usually reserved for special guests, such as senior platinum members." Standing just behind Emily was Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, gracefully dressed in a navy blue coat. Her eyes briefly scanned Karoline Leavitt, who sat in seat 2A, the very spot the crew appeared to be holding for Michelle. Michelle said nothing, but a nearby traveler, clearly a Democrat supporter, spoke just loud enough for others to hear. "That's Michelle Obama. She deserves the best seat on this flight." Karoline glanced up, visibly puzzled. She had followed all procedures, booked early through Patriot Air, paid in full, and arrived on time. As a platinum member herself, she couldn't understand why her seat had become a problem. Ever had a moment like that, where your status didn't seem to matter? Comment where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss these kinds of stories. Calmly, Karoline reached into her purse and retrieved her membership card. "I'm a platinum member," she said evenly. "This is the seat I confirmed when I booked." Emily's expression briefly flickered, surprised, then composed. "I understand, ma'am," she replied, her eyes flicking to Michelle. "But this seat is typically prioritized for someone of significant public stature who frequently flies with us." By now, several passengers were watching. A few held up their phones, recording. Low murmurs spread. Some labeled Karoline a Trump person, referring to her work in the former president's administration. What the crew didn't realize was that this moment, seemingly small, was about to spark a public backlash against the airline. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just any traveler. At 27, she was the former White House press secretary, influential enough to impact Patriot Air's chances at securing government contracts. Today, she was flying to New York to speak at a national media conference about polarization in journalism. She had chosen seat 2A for its extra space, perfect for prepping her remarks on the flight from D.C. Patriot Air was known for its luxury. First-class seats that cost more than most people's rent. Platinum perks like hot towels, champagne, and lie flat beds. But behind the luxury branding, the airline was facing real challenges. Aging software, weak customer service, and growing pressure to land government transport deals. Emily Carter, a flight attendant with 8 years on the job, took pride in managing her high-end passengers. Today, she felt it made sense to give the seat to Michelle Obama, especially with several passengers voicing support. "Ma'am, perhaps you'd be more comfortable in another area," she suggested, leaning. In her voice soft but insistent, Karoline glanced up from her tablet, where she had been editing her speech. "I'm sorry," she said, maintaining composure. "I chose this seat so I could work. I need the space to prepare." Michelle Obama remained silent, her presence steady but reserved. Yet another passenger chimed in. "I always see Miss Obama in that seat on this route. It's practically hers." The tension thickened. More cameras came out. Emily wavered, glancing between Karoline and Michelle. A self-identified social activist whispered to Emily, "Thanks for doing this. We'll make sure Patriot Air gets love on social media." It wasn't money, but the promise of public praise made Emily blush slightly. She nodded. In that instant, a dispute over a seat became a symbol. Politics at 30,000 feet. The first-class cabin grew quiet, then uneasy. Cabin supervisor David Lawson strode up confidently, clearly used to being in charge. He paused at seat 2A, raised his voice so others could hear. "Ma'am, we need you to move to prioritize a VIP passenger. This wasn't a request, it was an order." Karoline looked up again, her voice still steady. I've presented my ticket and platinum card. This is my confirmed seat. David's jaw tensed. He leaned down and spoke more quietly, but with a clear edge. Perhaps you're not familiar with how our airline operates, he said, emphasizing each word. We prioritize those with exceptional influence. Passengers began exchanging looks. The mood shifted, no longer just curious, but uneasy. Across the aisle, a woman quietly began filming the entire interaction. That video would go viral before the flight even landed. Michelle Obama stood quietly in the aisle, holding her handbag, offering no intervention. Her silence didn't ease the moment. Then another passenger snapped, "I've got an important meeting after we land." She glanced at her watch before stating firmly, "Miss Obama needs this seat." Her voice rang out clearly, adding another layer of pressure. A quiet voice from another row followed. "She's a Trump person, doesn't deserve that seat." The comment wasn't loud, but it was enough. Emboldened by the murmurs of agreement, David leaned in. His voice was barely above a whisper, but in the still cabin, it was loud enough for all to hear. "We can make this easy, or it can get complicated." It wasn't a suggestion, it was a threat. All eyes turned toward Karoline. She met his stare, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not moving," she said, her tone calm and unwavering. "This is my confirmed seat." 6 words. Simple. Direct, but they hit with the force of a verdict. David froze, his face flushed with frustration. Straightening, he adjusted his tie and marched to the front of the cabin, picking up the service phone with clear irritation. At that moment, the situation shifted. What began as a seating dispute now carried the weight of a political standoff. At 30,000 feet, tension rippled through the first-class cabin. Passengers exchanged glances, fingers tapping rapidly across phone screens as the scene unfolded on social media in real time. Karoline? She simply returned to her tablet, continuing to polish her speech as if nothing had happened. 5 minutes later, the cockpit door opened. Out stepped Captain Michael Bennett, his weathered face and sharp eyes reflecting years of experience. Behind him were David and flight attendant Emily Carter, both visibly flustered. This wasn't about a seat anymore. It had escalated. The captain stopped at 2A. "Ma'am," he began, his voice firm but measured. "I've been informed there's a situation. My crew has the authority to reassign seats to ensure passenger comfort." Karoline looked up. 3 airline staff now stood before her, a clear imbalance. But her posture didn't change. "Captain, with all due respect," she replied, her voice crisp and composed. "I have a confirmed ticket. I'm a platinum member. I selected this seat because it allows me to work in flight. There is no policy that compels me to give it up simply because someone else wants it." Her words weren't shouted, but they carried weight. The kind you'd expect from a former press secretary. The entire cabin fell quiet. Still, the standoff continued. David Lawson stepped forward again. "Ma'am, if you continue to be uncooperative," he said, his tone turning cold, "we'll be forced to remove you from the flight." The words hit hard. Karoline raised a brow, her first visible sign of surprise. "You're threatening to remove me from a flight because I won't give up a seat I legally booked?" Her voice was calm, but disbelief simmered beneath the surface. Before the captain could reply, a woman nearby, one of the loudest supporters of giving the seat to Michelle Obama, cut in. "This is outrageous," she exclaimed. "Miss Obama is a national icon. I've never seen such poor service." The irony didn't go unnoticed. Some passengers exchanged bemused looks. Captain Bennett's tone shifted, firmer now. "This is your final warning," he said. "If you don't move, we'll contact airport security." At that moment, Karoline reached into her coat and calmly pulled out her phone. She opened the camera app and hit record. "I want to be clear about what's happening," she said, holding the lens toward the crew. "I'm being threatened with removal for not giving up my reserved seat to another passenger. Not because of a policy violation, but because of preference." David's composure cracked, his face twisted with frustration. "Filming is not allowed," he barked, reaching toward the phone. But Karoline was quicker. She pulled it back smoothly, her gaze steady. "There's no federal regulation prohibiting filming on a plane, unless it interferes with crew duties," she said. "I'm recording this to protect my rights." That stopped him. He backed away, his expression darkening. Heavy footsteps echoed through the aisle. 2 airport security officers entered the cabin. Passengers stopped typing. The hum of the engines seemed to fade beneath the silence. Karoline remained seated, poised. Her phone continued recording from her lap. "Ma'am," one of the officers said evenly, "we've been informed of a situation. We need you to deplane." Karoline gave a polite nod but didn't budge. "I'd like to know," she asked calmly, "which airline policy I've violated." "I'm seated in my confirmed seat," she said, her voice calm and clear, "with a valid ticket and platinum membership." The 2 officers exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear. They had been called to remove someone who had broken no rule. "Ma'am, please gather your belongings and come with us," the second officer replied, carefully sidestepping her question. Karoline didn't move. Instead, she locked eyes with Captain Michael, standing a few steps away with David and Emily flanking him. "Am I being removed for refusing to give up my legally booked seat?" Her voice was sharp now, forcing the captain to face the truth. He hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. His eyes flickered, his voice low and uncertain. "You're being asked to leave for causing a disturbance." The word rang hollow. Even he didn't seem to believe it. A murmur swept through the first-class cabin. An elderly man in the second. Rowe shook his head slowly. A young woman seated near the rear wiped silent tears from her cheek. Karoline remained composed. She closed her tablet, placed her speech documents in a leather briefcase, and stood. Michelle Obama, still standing nearby, wore a neutral expression, not endorsing, not objecting. But one of her vocal supporters couldn't hide her smugness. "Serves." "Her right," she muttered, just loud enough to be heard. "Trump's people don't belong in that seat." Another passenger shot back. "She didn't do anything wrong." A third raised their phone and declared, "I'm recording everything." But none of it stopped what was already in motion. Karoline Leavitt was being escorted off the plane. She walked with her head held high, posture straight, eyes forward, the very image of someone wronged, yet refusing to be broken. As she passed David Lawson, standing near the aisle, a moment unfolded, one caught clearly on another passenger's phone. A self-proclaimed social activist leaned toward David. "Thank you for handling this," she whispered, with a conspiratorial smile. "We'll make sure Patriot Air gets praised." Line. The promise of public applause, though empty of legal merit, was caught on camera. "First class needs standards," she added darkly. Her meaning unmistakable, her words dripping with political venom. Outside the aircraft, as Karoline was led into the terminal, she pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved swiftly, typing a message to her most trusted aide. "Sarah Mitchell. I was removed from the flight, but they picked the wrong person to humiliate. No panic. No shame. Just the steady calm of a former White House strategist now preparing for war." She raised the phone to her ear. "Sarah, it's Karoline," she said. Her voice was low, but unwavering. "Get the media and legal teams together. Immediately. I was just ejected from a flight. And this is a clear case of political bias." The two security officers lingered nearby, shifting uneasily. One tapped through the incident report on his tablet. His expression tightened as he, "Read, ma'am," he began hesitantly, stepping forward. "I think there may have been a misunderstanding. The report says you caused a disturbance, but several passenger statements don't match." Karoline lowered her phone and locked eyes with him. "There was a misunderstanding," she said, voice cool but direct. But not on my part. I was seated in my confirmed seat with a valid ticket, then asked to give it up for someone else because of bias. When I refused, I was removed." The officer faltered. His colleague took a step back, distancing himself from the unfolding damage. "We apologize for the inconvenience," he muttered, weakly, before turning to retreat. Karoline didn't stop. She resumed recording, capturing a detailed audio log of every interaction, every phrase, every gesture she had endured. Her voice remained composed, but the words were razor-sharp, the kind only someone trained to speak under fire could deliver. As she spoke, a young woman approached, clutching a purse in one hand and a phone in the other. Karoline recognized her instantly, the passenger seated across from her in first class. "Miss Leavitt," the woman said, her voice trembling. With anger on Karoline's behalf. "I left the plane. I couldn't just sit there after what happened. I recorded everything, from when the flight attendant asked you to move to when security arrived." She held out her phone, showing Karoline the video. It included the moment another passenger promised online praise for the crew, all caught in crystal clarity. "This is political bias," the woman added, her eyes wet with tears. "You need this video." Karoline's expression shifted, the first softness she'd shown since the ordeal began. "Thank you," she said sincerely, her voice warm. "This will be very helpful." She and the young woman quietly exchanged contact details, the woman promising to send over the unedited video right away, and even offering to act as a witness if needed. What neither of them realized, and frankly no one else on that flight did either, was that the video was about to go viral, drawing millions of views and throwing Patriot Air into the middle of a national controversy. Karoline, already acting in her role as White House press secretary, had no time to waste. She immediately began coordinating with her media and legal teams, preparing to use the footage to demand accountability. But while that was unfolding, a completely different scene was taking shape on board the aircraft. Michelle Obama had quietly taken her seat, 2A. Calm, composed, and detached, she showed no reaction to the tension swirling around her. She hadn't asked for the seat, but the crew had chosen to prioritize her, influenced by pressure from a vocal group of passengers. Flight attendant Emily Carter, fully aware of Karoline's position, still bowed politely as she handed Michelle a complimentary glass of champagne. "We're so sorry for the disruption, Miss Obama," she said, her tone careful, almost reverent. "We want to make sure your flight is perfect." Back in the galley, away from passenger view, Emily and fellow crew member David Lawson shared a quiet exchange. "Thanks to her, we're going to look great online," David whispered, referring to the promise of positive media coverage from a nearby passenger. What they didn't know was how quickly that favor would come back to haunt them. Then, the mood shifted. An urgent call broke through on the crew's radio. The message was panicked and direct. "You've made a serious mistake." The voice belonged to a manager from Patriot Air's admin team. "You knew who she was. Why did this happen?" Emily, David, and Captain Michael Bennett exchanged anxious glances. Their confidence disappeared in an instant. They had known Karoline's identity the whole time, but the fear of upsetting left-leaning media or vocal passengers led them to push her aside. Now what had seemed like a minor decision was quickly spiraling into something much bigger. Across the country, At Patriot Air's Arlington, Virginia headquarters, up on the glass-walled top floor, CEO Robert Harrison was reviewing quarterly earnings when his phone rang. It was Laura Evans, the company's director of public relations. "Sir, we have a serious situation," she said, voice tight with concern. "A video is going viral. It shows Karoline Leavitt being removed from this morning's flight." At first, Robert was unmoved. "Passengers get removed all the time," he said. "Just issue a standard response." But Laura didn't back down. "This isn't that simple," she insisted. She wasn't disruptive. The crew knew who she was but gave her seat to Michelle Obama under passenger pressure. The video even shows them accepting a promise of media support for doing so. Suddenly, Robert understood. This wasn't about passenger behavior. It was about optics, power, and influence. Karoline Leavitt wasn't just any traveler. She was a senior government official, directly involved in transportation contracts that Patriot Air was currently negotiating. "Send me the video. Now," he said. His voice shook slightly as reality sank in. As he watched the footage, Robert's expression shifted from concern to alarm. The video showed clear bias, professional misconduct, and a calm, composed Karoline being unfairly removed. This wasn't just a mishap. It was a reputational crisis unfolding in real time. "Do we know who the passenger is?" Robert asked. Though he already suspected the answer, Laura confirmed it. "Yes, sir. It's Karoline Leavitt." Silence fell. Robert repeated her name, almost in disbelief. "The White House press secretary." "Yes," Laura said. "She oversees communications for the administration, and she's directly involved in the contracts we're discussing." Meanwhile, back in the VIP lounge at Reagan National Airport, Karoline sat with her fast-forming team. Her trusted aide, Sarah Mitchell, had arrived just 20 minutes after being notified. She brought the chief legal counsel and the White House communications director. Laptops were open. Phones rang non-stop. The energy was intense but controlled. "The video's already at 2 million views," the communications director reported, showing her the numbers rising in real time. "It's being picked up by major outlets and trending across platforms." Karoline exchanged a look with Sarah, a glance that spoke to their years of collaboration. "They knew exactly who I was," she said quietly. "But they still chose to prioritize politics over policy. They've just shown the public what they really stand for." Back at Patriot Air HQ, chaos was escalating. The social media team scrambled to contain the fallout, but the damage was spreading fast. Robert stood among his executives, pale-faced and rattled. That's when his assistant entered, holding a phone. "Miss Lee's office is on the line," she said. The room fell quiet. Robert took a breath, tried to stay composed, then picked up the call and put it on speaker. "Leavitt," he said, voice strained but calm. "We want to extend our deepest apologies for this morning's unacceptable incident. But would an apology be enough?" "Hold on," said the chief financial officer, flipping through his notes in a visible panic. "Karoline Leavitt, the White House press secretary." Robert Harrison gave a slow nod, his expression darkening. Karoline's voice rang clearly through the speaker, calm but cutting. "Mr. Harrison, I appreciate you taking this call. The crew knew exactly who I was, yet chose to act under political pressure. Today's incident raises serious concerns about Patriot Air's judgment, especially while you're negotiating federal contracts." The room tensed. Executives exchanged uneasy glances. The weight of what had just happened hit them all at once. Karoline didn't pause. Her tone sharpened. "I'm requesting an immediate meeting with your leadership. Today. This isn't just personal issue anymore. The political favoritism captured on video casts a shadow over your credibility as a government contractor. And just like that, the wheels began to turn. Board members were called in at record speed, some straight off the golf course, others abandoning family events. The boardroom was stifling, heavy with anticipation. They all knew who was coming. More importantly, they understood what she now represented. When Karoline Leavitt entered, the room fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Eyes turned. The same navy blue suit she'd worn during the incident sent a quiet but powerful message. She hadn't forgotten, and neither would they. She was accompanied by Sarah Mitchell, her trusted aide, and two heavyweights, the chief legal counsel and a senior communications strategist. The message was clear. This wasn't just a complaint, it was a coordinated offensive. CEO Robert Harrison dimmed the lights and cued the screen. The video played. What unfolded on screen was damning. The crew's dismissive tone, the captain's weak excuses, and most damaging, the moment a passenger promised media support in exchange for bias. Every face in the room paled. Some board members couldn't even bring themselves to meet Karoline's gaze. When the footage ended, silence took over. Robert cleared his throat, his voice unsteady. "Ms. Leavitt, we deeply regret the unacceptable treatment you endured. This doesn't reflect Patriots' values. I'm not here for apologies." Karoline cut in smoothly. Her words sliced through the corporate formality like a razor. "I have two demands and one decision." She paused, locking eyes with Robert. First, the crew members involved, Emily Carter, David Lawson, and Captain Michael Bennett, must be suspended pending investigation. Second, I'm recommending that the White House reviews all active transportation contracts with Patriot Air. Robert glanced around the table. Panic simmered beneath his professional veneer. "Ms. Leavitt," he said cautiously, "we understand your frustration, but maybe a temporary suspension would be more reasonable. These employees have years of service. There are union constraints to consider." Karoline leaned forward, her voice firm. "This is not a negotiation. You either take full responsibility, or I ensure the Department of Transportation conducts a full-scale investigation into your operations. That government contract you're pursuing, consider it at risk." The threat wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. Everyone heard it loud and clear. Then came the breaking point. The boardroom door burst open. A junior analyst, breathless, rushed in and handed Robert a tablet. "Sir," he panted, "the stock is plummeting. We're down 12% already. Analysts say it could hit 30% if we don't act immediately." Robert looked at the screen, then back, at Karoline. It wasn't just a PR disaster anymore. It was an existential crisis. The woman they had quietly removed now controlled the fate of the airline. 3 floors below, in a smaller, unadorned meeting room, Emily Carter, David Lawson, and Captain Michael Bennett sat in heavy silence. They'd been summoned abruptly, and the air was thick with dread. The HR director, Ellen Brooks, walked in, flanked by a legal advisor and 2 silent security officers. It was clear. This wasn't a routine review. "I'll be direct," Ellen began, placing 3 identical folders in front of them. "Your employment with Patriot Air is terminated, effective immediately." The words struck hard. Emily covered her mouth to stifle a sob. David clenched his jaw, eyes burning. Michael stared blankly, the years etched into his face, aging him. In seconds, "We're sorry," David blurted. "But we were under pressure. Passengers demanded it. Miss Leavitt wasn't cooperating." Ellen turned her laptop toward them. The now viral video began to play. Everything was there. David's condescending tone, Emily's hesitation, Michael's avoidance, and that whispered promise of media support. "You call that pressure?" Ellen asked sharply. "You knew exactly who Karoline Leavitt was, and you still chose another passenger, for the sake of media attention?" But what came next made David's face drain of color. The audio clearly captured the whispered deal. "Give her the seat, and we'll praise you online." The motive for bias was now undeniable. Is agreeing to favoritism in exchange for publicity now part of our policy? Ellen asked. Each word pointed. Emily broke down, her voice shaking. "We made a terrible mistake. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't stop it." Captain Bennett, who had once weathered storms in the air, seemed completely defeated. "I trusted their judgment," he muttered. But now it was too late for trust or second chances. He spoke quietly. "I didn't directly witness the first confrontation." Ellen looked at them directly, her voice unwavering. "You failed. Today. Not just the company, but the basic standards of human decency." Emily sobbed harder. David's face, red with anger before, turned pale. Michael lowered his head, unable to speak. Ellen continued, her tone frosty. "You'll be escorted out to collect your belongings. Your final paycheck will include 2 weeks of severance, more than this situation deserves." As they walked out, the three felt a wave of the same humiliation Karoline had experienced earlier. It was poetic and punishing, a form of justice. That stung. Meanwhile, at Patriot Air's headquarters, the main auditorium was filled with hundreds of employees. This wasn't a routine gathering. On stage stood CEO Robert Harrison, flanked by Karoline Leavitt and her White House team. "Today," Robert began, his voice cutting through the quiet, "Patriot Air failed a passenger in the worst way. This isn't a one-time mistake, it's a sign of deeper problems that we must face immediately." He motioned to Karoline, who stepped up with authority and experience. "This isn't just about holding people accountable," she said, scanning the room. "It's about changing everything, the company's entire culture. Here's the thing. What happened that day wasn't wrong because Karoline is a White House press secretary. It would have been just as wrong if she were a teacher, a nurse, or a college student." The room fell silent. Some nodded in agreement, others looked down in guilt. To show how serious they were, Robert made a bold announcement. "Starting tomorrow, Patriot Air will shut down for 48 hours. No flights, no services. Every operation will pause so we can begin phase 1 of a new training program." You could hear the gasp in the room. In an industry where even small delays cost big money, this was a massive move. Millions would be lost, but the point wasn't the cost. It was the message. Over the next few weeks, Patriot Air went through a transformation not seen in its 30-year history. Meeting rooms nationwide turned into training hubs. Flight schedules were adjusted so every employee, from baggage handlers to the CEO, could complete mandatory anti-bias training. But this wasn't the checkbox kind of training that people ignore. It was tough, in-depth, and at times uncomfortable. Karoline herself attended several sessions standing before employees, some skeptical, some defensive. "This is your moment," she said. "What happened to me happens to others every day. People who don't have the platform I do. Let's start changing that." For many, her presence changed everything. She wasn't just a public figure in a headline. She was someone who had lived the story. Her willingness to engage even after what she went through sent a clear signal. This wasn't about revenge. It was about real reform. But outside the corporate walls, the fallout kept spreading. Emily Carter, David Lawson, and Michael Bennett quickly learned that in the digital age, reputations don't fade quietly. David sat in his Arlington apartment, surrounded by polite rejection emails. "Thank you for your interest. But we've chosen another candidate. The message was clear. No airline wanted to be linked to the man from the viral video. Emily got the same treatment. Even when interviews looked promising, everything changed once someone recognized her. "You're the flight attendant from the bias incident, right?" The interview ended soon after. Michael, with 30 years of experience, couldn't even land an entry-level job. His long career was reduced to a few bad minutes. Minutes when he chose silence over doing the right thing. Even the passenger who supported the crew didn't walk away clean. Patriot Air banned her for life. But the consequences reached further. National news covered her actions. Her employer put her on leave. Friends backed away. Social media branded her the biased passenger. For perhaps the first time, she had to confront what her actions really meant. Back at Patriot Air, change was underway. New policies introduced a zero-tolerance rule for political bias. The way seat disputes were handled was completely revised, and employees were now protected when reporting misconduct. The employee handbook was rewritten, clearly stating that accepting gifts or favors from passengers would mean instant dismissal. Soon, passengers began to notice. Interviews at gates and baggage claims revealed a shift. "The crew treats everyone better now," a frequent flyer shared. Before, it felt like politics affected everything. Now, let's be honest. Progress wasn't instant or flawless. Real change never is. But slowly, Patriot Air started to reflect the values it always advertised: fairness, respect, and professionalism. At Reagan National Airport, another regular passenger said, "I had an issue with my seat once and the way it was handled. Calm, fair, professional. No one felt ignored." Karoline, in her official White House role, stayed closely involved. Every change was verified by independent auditors. Patriot stock, once shaky, began to climb again, a sign that investors believed in the new direction. Hiring policies were overhauled too. Diversity initiatives were no longer just numbers on paper. They focused on genuine inclusion, on building a team that reflected real-world values. And then came something no one expected. 6 months after the incident nearly destroyed the airline, Karoline stepped up once again. On a rainy Tuesday morning, she announced a new project, the Second Chance program. Backed by a White House fund, this initiative was built for people who lost their jobs due to bias-related incidents. It offered training, support, and a path back to employment. "Accountability shouldn't mean a lifetime ban," Karoline said at the launch. "It means recognizing mistakes and working to fix them. If we don't give people a way forward, we can't claim to be building a fairer world." The program's first participants? Emily, David, and Michael. Their path forward wasn't easy. The program pushed them to confront uncomfortable truths. They had to understand how their actions affected not just Karoline, but countless others, without her voice. David, who had been the most resistant, changed the most. In group discussions, he opened up about his upbringing, a place where political bias wasn't questioned, just accepted. "I didn't think I was biased," David admitted during one of the most emotional sessions. "I figured that just because I wasn't vocal about my opinions, I was in the clear. But this whole experience opened my eyes. Bias can creep in quietly, even when you don't notice it." Emily's reflection centered on something many relate: moral courage, the ability to speak up even if it means putting your job on the line. "I knew it was wrong," she said, her voice shaking. "But I was scared. I didn't want to lose my job by questioning David or the captain. Now I realize staying silent made me part of the problem." Michael, the most experienced of the three, faced the hardest reckoning. After decades believing he treated everyone fairly, one moment forced him to question it all. I trusted the system, he said quietly. I put rank before people. I can't undo it, but I can spend the rest of my career trying to make it right. With certifications from the Second Chance program in hand, Emily and David began applying to other airlines. This time, their resumes didn't hide what happened. They told their story as proof of how they had grown. While the mistakes still mattered, some employers were willing to look at the full picture. Emily was the first to get hired, as a ground staff member at a small regional airline. The job paid less. The shifts were longer. The pressure was real, but it was a fresh start, something she once thought she'd never have. A month later, David followed suit. He was hired as a baggage handler at another carrier. It wasn't glamorous, but he didn't mind. For him, it was a chance to rebuild. Michael, because of his age and the toll of the scandal, didn't return to flying. Instead, he found a new purpose, teaching in the very program that gave him another chance. He now helps others understand just how serious one poor choice can be. Meanwhile, Patriot Air pushed ahead with reforms. New rules prioritized fairness, professionalism, and zero tolerance for political bias. Passengers began to notice. In interviews, at boarding gates and baggage claims, many said the crew felt more attentive, more balanced. Independent auditors confirmed the shift. For the first time, the airline scored equally high in satisfaction across all political demographics, a milestone the industry hadn't seen before. In a quiet meeting at Patriot Air's Arlington headquarters, Karoline Leavitt sat across from CEO Robert Harrison, reviewing the 6-month progress report. She closed the folder with a measured look of satisfaction. "You've shown real change," she said calmly. "That deserves acknowledgement." Robert, visibly worn from the months of upheaval, nodded. "It wasn't easy," he replied, "but it had to happen. What you went through made us face issues we'd ignored for too long." "That's usually how change works," Karoline replied. "Not through ease, but confrontation." They stood and shook hands, no longer adversaries, not quite friends, but partners in something bigger, a transformation that redefined what accountability could look like. 6 months after the scandal, Patriot Air wasn't just back on its feet. It was thriving. Passenger interviews at airports like Reagan National and JFK spoke volumes. "I feel respected no matter who I am," one traveler shared. "They actually listen now. It's not just about celebrities or politics anymore. I used to worry my political views might affect how I was treated. That's not a concern now," said another. The Second Chance program soon became a blueprint for other industries, a way to balance accountability with growth. Emily, David, and Michael, though starting from scratch, began to rebuild with steady steps. Emily earned the respect of her new colleagues through her work ethic and honesty. David, despite the physical demands of the job, found meaning in proving to himself and others that he could change. Michael, in his new role, inspired others with his hard-won wisdom, turning his past mistakes into lessons that could help others avoid the same path. Patriot Air didn't stop there. They introduced new whistleblower protections and clearer procedures for resolving disputes, making it easier for employees to speak up without fear. Their story became more than a company case study. It became an example of how facing mistakes directly can lead to meaningful progress. The incident that sparked it all, when Karoline Leavitt was removed from her VIP seat to make room for Michelle Obama, shined a light on something deeper. Political bias isn't just a Washington problem. It can influence everything, from customer service to personal behavior. And yet, Karoline's calm but firm response and her push for reform showed how accountability and unity can work hand in hand. Emily, David, and Michael's journey proves that justice doesn't always mean being cast out. It can also mean being called to rise up, learn, and do better. In today's polarized world, this story reminds us, recognizing bias, taking action, and offering a path to redemption can change more than just one company. It can reshape our communities. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel for more real-world examples of growth, justice, and change. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.